Jeff Berwick. We have Jeff Berwick on the line, folks. And Jeff is... Let me get your bio. I printed it out. Jeff, hold on one second.
Why don't I just tell you who I am? Make it easy on you.
Okay, go for it. Tell our... I wanted to read... Here, I got it. Hold on. Let me just introduce you properly, Jeff.
All right.
Jeff is an anarchist, libertarian, freedom fighter against mankind's two biggest enemies, the state and the central banks. Jeff is the chief editor of The Dollar Vigilante, a newsletter focused on investments and expatriation. I can't even say that word, man. This is ridiculous.
Expatriation.
There we go. Information to survive the coming collapse of the U.S. dollar-based financial system. Jeff is also a contributing editor at many of the world's largest libertarian financial and precious metals related websites, including LouRockwell.com, The Daily Reckoning, Whiskey and Gunpowder, Kitco, Gold Eagle, SafeHaven.com, Market Oracle, and is a speaker at many of the world's most important hard money investment and freedom conferences, including Libertopia and the San Francisco and New York Hard Assets Show, and the PDAC held in Toronto, the Silver Summit, and all the Cambridge House conferences in Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, and Saskatoon. Jeff, sorry to take away your thunder, but how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Now, for our audience, could you just give a short little bio about yourself? Not what I just told you, obviously, kind of how you got involved in the media and what made you wake up to what's going on and start your own radio podcast, The Anarchist. What kind of made you want to start being involved in the media, and expressing your opinions and talking to people?
Yeah, well, it actually all started around the year 2000 with the collapse of the tech bubble, because I had started an internet company where I'm from in Canada called Stockhouse.com, which is still the top financial website in Canada. It's equivalent to TheStreet.com or CBS Market Watch of Canada. And I started it out of my house in 1994, and by 1999 or 2000, it was worth $240 million, and it had about 250 employees in 8 countries around the world. And then a few months later, after the tech bubble burst, it was almost worthless for a period of time, and I had a lot of questions about that. I wondered what happened exactly. And I went around to MBAs and economists and all the people that you'd think would know these sort of things, and no one knew. They all just said, well, that just happens sometimes. And I didn't take that as being a good enough answer, so I decided to sell the company, and I bought a sailboat, and I tried to sail around the world just trying to figure out what's going on in general in the world, because I knew what I was hearing on the mainstream media wasn't exactly the truth, and I wanted to see it for myself. And in the meantime, I read everything I could on anything to do with economics, finance, and things like that. And that's when I read G. Edward Griffin's The Creature from Jekyll Island, which talks about the founding of the Federal Reserve Central Bank in 1913, and how really corrupt and heinous it was of a takeover of the U.S. money system. And from there, I really got into Austrian economics, which really talks a lot about free market economics, and that led me down the path to starting to research into free markets and libertarianism and anarchism and things like that. And so over a period of about 15 years, I went to about 100 different countries and read everything I could on all these topics, and really became passionate about it, because I realized that most people have never heard a lot of these things, especially in the financial realm. And so I was watching around 2008, and I was expecting a collapse to happen, and it happened exactly as I expected. And so I thought, man, I really know what's going on here, and it doesn't seem like many other people do. It seems like they're in the dark about most of this stuff. So I decided to start the Dollar Vigilante, which is a website and a newsletter, in 2009, and just been writing about these sort of things ever since. The tagline is surviving and prospering during and after the dollar collapse, so that's what I'm expecting to happen, and quite soon, actually. And so that's really what I've gotten into. And then as I got more into freedom, I've become really just passionate about freedom. The more I learn about it, and the more that I see that it is the best way for society to organize itself is without using violence, which government is violence. It's just the biggest gang in the region. There's no difference between mafia and government. So I've been a real proponent of free markets and anarchism and voluntarism, and that's when I started Anarchast a few years ago, and now it's the largest anarchist interview show in the world. We have had over 200 anarcho-capitalists on the program, and that's essentially what I've been doing. And then it's all sort of led up to today, where funnily enough, I've been talking this entire time since I started the Dollar Vigilante and Anarchast about how evil government is, and then I announced today that I'm going to run for the Parliament in the upcoming Canadian federal election. So that got a lot of attention today because of everyone assumed that I would never get involved with that system. But after seeing what Ron Paul did in 2008 and 2012 and how he created millions of people to wake up to libertarian ideas, I realized that the political system is something that can be used to educate people, and it's something that is a often unused tool for people who want to spread the ideas of freedom. So that's my latest thing. Today I'm running for the Parliament in Canada, in the Libertarian Party of Canada, which is a really interesting party. So yeah, I've been up to a lot, and I still am up to a lot. I just can't seem to stop spreading freedom and spreading information and truth about what's going on in the world.
Well, that's awesome. You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, if you're an anarchist, well, that means that you can't run for office, and because you just don't believe in government." Well, the thing is, we have to live in this world, and we are governed at this point, and we have to sometimes go into the matrix to be able to change it. And like you said, you want to diminish government, and so the best way to do that is probably get involved politically and speak to people and get people on the same page so that we can actually make.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've realized over the last few years as I became quite hardcore anarcho-capitalist or anarchist, the same thing in my opinion, is that I was pretty against having anything to do with the government because, of course, I consider it to be evil. It's an unnecessary evil in my opinion. And what I realized is that that's how most other libertarians and anarchists think as well. And because they never get involved in the political system, a lot of them won't vote or anything. That hasn't really constrained the government at all by us not participating in it. So I realized that we need to use this system to get our messages out there more. And of course, the people who really need to hear this message are the people who are still trapped in this left-right paradigm, who don't know there's other options. And they're finally getting tired of it, finally. We're seeing that all over the world, that people are just giving up almost on anything to do with government because it always works out bad. They'll walk up and one year they'll tick on the left side of the box and then things are horrible. And then the next year they go up and well, let's try the right side of the box. Horrible again. So people are kind of, they're confused. They don't know. They don't know there's other options out there, and that would be the libertarian sort of angle on things. And in order to speak to those kind of people, you have to go into their seedy system of violence and trying to use the government to make other people do things and all these horrible things that government does. You have to sort of get involved into that system for them to even acknowledge or listen to you. And Ron Paul proved that it works.
Jeff, how do we convince the general public that the government has a monopoly on violence and they really don't care about our safety? Because that's what they preach to us all day, is we're doing all this violence for your own safety.
Yeah, everything. It's all 1984. Every word has the opposite meaning. And yeah, we're here to beat you up for your own safety. Yeah, there's a guy who's in his house and he had a long day and he wanted to smoke a little marijuana and relax because he's really stressed out after working 15 hours a day because he can barely keep up with inflation caused by the central banks and pays extortion fees, taxation to the government. And he wants to have a little smoke of marijuana and relax and watch a football game or something. And the government says, well, we're here to protect you with flash brain grenades and SWAT teams and come in your house and shoot your dog to make sure you don't do that. It's absolutely insane. And actually the war on drugs is one of the things that really needs to end. This has been heinous. It's been one of the worst things in human history, this war on drugs, which has now gone on for more than 40 years since Richard Nixon was actually the first one who started it. And I don't know if you guys know this, but the poster boy, the person they propped up to be the lead person on the war on drugs was Elvis Presley, who later died of a drug overdose. So it's yeah, it's pretty funny.
Adam Kokesh talks about it in his book, Freedom. He says, because doing drugs might ruin your life. If you do them, the government will put you in jail and ruin your life. So it's just it doesn't do anything, and it's been shown that since we've taken over Afghanistan, I mean, the opium production is skyrocketing, and all the opium comes from Afghanistan, and we control that region for the most part. I mean, and so if you look at it that way, it's like they're running the scam. They keep it illegal here, but then actually produce it over there and guard it with with U.S. troops, and then they have the cartels bring it in, boom, and they make a bunch of money. So they make it. There's money in keeping things illegal. It's common sense.
Yeah, and a lot of people sort of recognize that's the case, but they don't seem to get the cognitive dissonance in their own mind. The CIA has been proven over and over and over again to be the largest transporter of plants, which they call drugs, things like marijuana and heroin and cocaine and things like that. They're all plant derivatives. And they're the biggest supplier of it worldwide. And it's just crazy that people support this drug war when really all it is a fascist takeover of the entire drug industry by facets of the government, the really dark black areas of the government that no one's allowed to find out what they're doing. But every now and then one of their planes crashes full of cocaine or something, and people go, well, that must have just been just a coincidence, or maybe they're taking it back to impound the cocaine. It's like, people are just, they watch their television programming at night, and it's called programming for a reason, and they will never tell you these things. And so a lot of people are living in a real a bubble of non-reality and don't really see things for what they really are. And that's why I wanted to get involved in the political system, as horrible as it is, just to see if I can get people to hear these thoughts and ideas which they don't normally hear through their mainstream media programming, and definitely not through their 12 years of public indoctrination government prison camps when they're young, doing their Pledge of Allegiance and being brainwashed essentially, and yeah, it's just insane, and we need to change all these things, and the time has come, and I think we're starting to see a real revolution starting to build now, and I think Ron Paul started that in 2008, and it's starting to really build. You might not see it everywhere all the time yet, but because I'm paying attention, I see a lot more. I'm seeing it all over the world, and I think even in Canada, we could see the Libertarian Party of Canada, which really wasn't even a party it's never had anyone elected. It really wasn't much of a party. It was a few guys really up until a few years ago, and now it's we're hoping to fill every single riding in the upcoming election. That's over 300 ridings with libertarians, and get them involved in debates in all those communities. So there's a lot going on. I think we're going to see that in the U.S. more and more. There's these Students for Liberties just growing like crazy. A lot of very libertarian, a lot of the younger people are more libertarian because all they're seeing is the bad parts of government. They don't see any of the so-called good parts. There is no good part of government, but there is ways you can take more advantage of the government if you're in a certain position. And that's been the older people who have lived off of children now for decades, putting them into more and more debt. And kids are waking up today going, they're born with $250,000 worth of U.S. federal government debt overhanging them. So they're born into debt slavery. And then they're going to be put in the public indoctrination camps. And then they're going to be told they have to go for 4 more years and pay a lot for it and go into more debt for college education, which won't get them a job because the economy is destroyed by the government and the central banks. So people are starting to wake up. How this ends up, it could be, I have no idea. It's going to be a interesting few years ahead as all these old systems start to collapse.
No, I totally agree. Now, you obviously you have experience in the financial sector of our society because you're an entrepreneur. You started Stockhouse.com, and you saw it all happen. You've been around the block. Now, how has our current fractional reserve banking system with the central bank in charge, and how has that destroyed free markets? It's happening everywhere, in countries everywhere, over and over. And how do we change people's thinking to let them know, hey, this is not sustainable?
Yeah, we're also seeing a large End the Fed movement that started up quite a bit in the U.S. It's actually still really big in places like Germany. End the Federal Reserve is like a weekly big group of people get together and protest against the Federal Reserve. People don't realize that central banks have nothing to do with free markets. They're actually a tenet of communism. It's central planning of the money system. And they use the government violence-backed control to force people to use that money. And that's what legal tender laws are. And so when you have this secretive group of bankers that are outside of the system, it doesn't even matter if they're inside the system, it's still heinous, who can just control the money supply and the interest rates throughout the entire economy, you can control an entire economy by doing that. And actually, you can never improve an economy by manipulating interest rates or printing more money. This makes total sense to somebody if you say, do you think counterfeiting money is good? Do you think if the guy down the street starts counterfeiting money in his basement, do you think that's going to improve the economy? And they'd be like, no, that's terrible. He should be arrested. Well, that's what the Federal Reserve does. That's one of the only things they do. And because they print money, and because the money doesn't affect prices throughout the entire economy all at the same time, it sends wrong price signals to everybody, and that's how we end up with these bubbles. So all of a sudden, seem to be quite a bit of money around, and no one really knows why. And it's all just seems to be from certain areas. And a lot of entrepreneurs or businessmen will say, well, look at this. There's a lot of money around. We should start building and investing in our products so that we can get more of this money from our services. And that's how you get things like the tech bubble or the housing bubble. You just look at what happened in Las Vegas or Florida. A lot of business people just said, well, there seems to be a lot of interest in housing. There must be a huge demand for housing. There wasn't. It was all created by a massive increase in the money supply. It also, with the interest rates down at 0%, and then they started doing all these crazy mortgage-backed securities, which made it almost super easy to get a mortgage for $1 million if you don't even have a job. All these things created all this economic malinvestment because there wasn't a great need for houses. There was definitely not a massive need for houses, but because they were printing money and manipulating the interest rates, people thought that there was. So they build all these houses and people start bidding up the houses because they think, oh, this is a great investment, it's going up. And then once they stop printing money or once interest rates start to go up again, all that gets washed away. And that actually ends up being capital that was destroyed because a lot of capital goes into building all those houses. So in the end, central banks can never help an economy. It's not possible to help an economy by having a monopoly over the money and printing or not printing money and manipulating interest rates. It's impossible to help an economy overall. You can help certain segments of the economy, and that's what we're seeing. The financial markets and the stock market are doing well because they're helping those areas because of what they're doing. But that doesn't mean the economy is doing better. It's actually doing worse, as we're seeing with so many economic problems. There's 1 in 4 children in the U.S. on food stamps right now. 1 in 6 adults are on food stamps. I believe there's 11 states in the U.S. where there's more people on welfare who have jobs. The food stamps are over 50 million. I mentioned that one already. But unemployment, they skew all these numbers as well. It's actually, if you computed it just the way they computed it 20 years ago, it's over 20%. But they've just learned how to manipulate all these numbers. So people think the economy is doing okay, but it's not. And it's actually going to get much worse very soon, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the mainstream media goes along with the lie. And so, Jeff, do you think if we can educate the enforcers of the system that they're also being played as pawns in the game, like, say, your local police officer, because they're probably on average not really bad people, but they just don't understand the economics of the system and the masters at the central bank that they're actually serving at the top of the pyramid. So do you think if we can educate these people economically, then maybe it can change their mind?
It's going to be very hard to change the mind of anyone who gets their paycheck from the system itself. People are very self-preserving, and I think that's fine, but the problem is government is evil, and then they get involved in this evil system, and then they try to preserve their place in that. I don't think that the answers are going to come from changing the minds of the people who are in charge right now. I think that I'd estimate that the real people who are really in charge, and that's not Barack Obama, and that's not most of the presidents or prime ministers around the world, they just read off teleprompters. Barack Obama is essentially a puppet who reads a teleprompter. He doesn't even know what he's talking about. He doesn't even care. He just collects his paycheck and enjoys all the power he has. But the people who really control things, they already know what's going on. They know know that they're manipulating the system to enrich themselves and to impoverish the rest. And so we're never going to convince them to stop doing it. But what we're going to see is a lot of people starting to wake up and start to turn away from a lot of these systems, including central banking. If we can ever shut down central banking, the Federal Reserve, that would be a huge help to the economy. It'd be massive. Of course, there'd be a huge collapse beforehand, but that's going to happen one way or another. So it's sort of like taking your medicine now or taking it later, and it's going to be worse later. So we need to wake people up to that. That's one of the platforms of the Libertarian Party of Canada, is to get rid of the Bank of Canada. And there's actually a lawsuit going through right now in Canada to try to get rid of it. So people are waking up. I think it's about educating people and educating the masses more than the elites. The elites, like I said, I think they already know that what they're doing is evil, but they enjoy it. But there's 7 billion of us, and literally a few hundred of them, as far as I can tell. And so it's really amazing how they've got so many people brainwashed and thinking that they control all these people. All it takes for people to do is wake up and say, I don't think anyone should own me or control me using violence. And the day that happens with enough people in society, we can have real change.
Yeah, we have the non-aggression principle. I think most people can understand that if you just sit down and talk with someone for 20 minutes and explain to them, hey, you own yourself, the government doesn't own you, and you have natural rights, no matter if you believe in God or you don't, doesn't matter. No one owns you. You're not a slave. And then they start thinking about, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. Well, of course it should make sense. It's inherent in all of us. We own ourselves. Now, we know Obama, he's just an actor manufactured by the elites running things. So let's talk a little bit about how we, how do we replace this system, this false, system that basically, is not bringing us prosperity. These central bankers are not going to make the economy run. It's not a machine that you can just set on a setting and say the economy needs to grow at this rate. We're going to print money at this rate. No. It has to do with a lot of factors. The government can't control the economy. You have to let the economy operate and let the free market operate. That's why we had so much malinvestment, is because the government lowered interest rates and controlled the money supply, and it gave wrong signals to the markets. And you obviously know a lot about that. So you saw it with the tech bubble. Sam has talked about this before. People were investing in millions of dollars into websites during the tech bubble that didn't produce anything. I mean, there was companies that didn't produce anything, but people were investing millions of dollars into it, thinking that it was going to bring them prosperity without doing anything. That is a false hope that people think. It's a scam. I mean, it's literally gambling. How do we replace this? Is it going to digital currency or many currencies that not having our eggs all in one basket? What is the solution to replace this system?
Well, I think the solution's already baked in the cake. This system is going to collapse. We've now been over 40 years with a completely fiat, unbacked currency around the world, ever since the US dollar dropped any sort of gold linkage on August 15th, 1971. Once again, with Richard Nixon, that guy really was around for a lot of horrible things, the drug war and taking the gold backing away from the dollar. Because of that, governments around the world have been unrestrained, and because they're all running off of this fiat currency system that they can just print up money at will, many of them have been doing it at higher and higher rates, and they also have been going into more and more debt as they do it. We now have pretty much the entire Western world is insolvent, bankrupt, including the U.S. The U.S. is the worst of them all. With so much debt. So when you add up all the debt and liabilities of the U.S. federal government, it's over $95 trillion. And that works out to about $250,000 per person in the U.S. So a family of four, that's $1 million of debt and liabilities overhanging it. Most people, 80% of people in the U.S., I believe, are living paycheck to paycheck. So I don't think they're going to be paying that off anytime soon. So we're going to see a collapse happen. We're going to see a dollar collapse happen. We're going to see financial system and economic collapse. And that is when we actually have an opportunity to fix things, because a lot of people are going, first there's going to be a lot of chaos and a lot of horrible things happen. But as things start to hopefully settle down, a lot of people are going to have a lot of questions about what happened and how do we make sure that doesn't happen again. So we have to get out this information that it was all caused by government and central banks, and never do that again, ever. But there's things that we can do right now as well. We can start to move away from the dollar, which I've been doing for a long time. I write the Dollar Vigilante, where our main focus is telling people to get out of dollars and get into anything that Janet Yellen can't counterfeit and turn worthless in a few years. There's things like Bitcoin, free market money, excellent, amazing currency. If you don't know about it, if anyone out there hasn't heard of it, you have to look into it. It's amazing currency. Of course, in the media, they'll try to make it sound like it's scary or bad. That's what they always do, but it's not. And the more people that use that, the better. Of course, there's gold and silver, and there's all sorts of credit cards and bank cards now that are tied to gold and silver. So I think that those are good ways. Just sort of get outside of the financial system, outside of the monetary system as much as possible, and try to spread just ideas of liberty. I think that's the key, is education. And again, that's why I'm trying to do it through the political system, is to see if I can get people more woken up through that system, because that's the real key. Because once enough people wake up, and I think it was in the last century, and the communism wasn't very big in the early 1900s, but around 1920, it started to grow a little bit. And eventually it sort of reached a point where it had about 10% of the public kind of liked it. And it took off from there. And now everywhere in the world is quite communist or socialist at the very least. And socialism is just communism light, including the U.S. And so we could just see that happen in this century, a century of libertarianism, of liberty, of people who understand that the best way forward is to have less government and hopefully no government, and definitely not any central banks. It was Ron Paul who said it's not an accident that the century of total war in the 20th century was also the century of central banking. You can't have all these giant wars without money printing. So these are evil, non-free market, heinous systems, and we just have to get people to realize that, and then things will start to change.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And what we need to do is we need to start explaining to people that most of us are on the same page. It's the elites that have their own agenda. These politicians that are bought off, that have been politicians for 30 years, we know they are taking money from special interests, and that's who they're loyal to. They're not loyal to their constituents. I mean, we have this Trans-Pacific Partnership potentially going through that's completely secret, and my congressman, I've actually called his people in his office have no idea that it's even secret. I've asked them, I said, you know that it's secret? And they say, why would it be secret? I mean, I go, because have you read the reports? I mean, it's ridiculous. But of course, my congressman still supports it. So it just shows us, that they're completely out of touch, these elites, and the people really trying to control us. The media's run by 6 corporations. We know that. So we need to, as a population, start just doing it ourselves, like you do Anarchast, and you're doing a great job at that. I mean, you're waking up people and explaining to them, hey, we don't have to listen to Fox News and MSNBC. That doesn't have to be your opinions. You don't have to say, oh, well, I have to vote for Mitt Romney or President Obama. You can think differently. And that's really where we're going to make the most changes, just talking to people and keep spreading the word and getting active. A lot of people, they think that Dancing with the Stars is more interesting than fighting tyranny, but we don't here. And that's what we have to light a fire under the population if we want things to change, and we can make it happen.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with what you just said. And I actually have to run. I don't know if you guys know, I only had half an hour here. I'm doing radio show after radio show tonight with my announcement of running for the government of Canada.
No problem. Sorry, there was some technical difficulties in the beginning, Jeff. We'll get you on again soon. Jeff Berwick of Anarchast.com. We thank you for joining us, and we'll hope to have you on again soon, Jeff.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Congratulations on your candidacy.
Thank you.